Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter Dawson, Finance Director. It's my privilege to be able to present to you tonight the financial accounts and financial performance for 2013-14. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of that financial position. As Mike said earlier, within your packs, and in particular within the annual report there, you've got further detail on the annual accounts themselves. And so I'll be happy to pick up any questions either later in the Q&A session or else with that following the meeting. So please read that at your leisure. I am told it's a riveting read. In terms of overall financial performance then, the key headlines are that we outperformed our financial plan to monitor. So we submitted a plan to monitor for the year for a surplus of 2 million and we outperformed that. Our external auditors, Deloitte, scrutinised those accounts as they're obliged to do, and were able to report a clean bill of health in terms of the way that we prepared those accounts and the fact that they reflected a true and fair view. In terms of Monitor, our regulator, and how they assess financial risk, they do that through what's now called the Continuity of Service Risk Rating. We achieved a rating of 3, which was in line with our plan. So that was a good result. And I'll come back to this at the end, and the Chairman's already alluded to it. In terms of the challenging financial outlook, we continue to have to drive out year-on-year 4% efficiency requirement each and every year on a recurrent basis. And as you'll know from the news, that has become an increasing challenge for the NHS across the country, and equally it's a challenge for us. We didn't meet all of that target in 13-14, but through good financial planning and careful management of reserves, we were able to mitigate that risk and nonetheless produce an overall result that produced a surplus in excess of our plan. In terms of the audit opinion then, as I said, Deloitte's, or our external auditors, they were on site for 3 weeks scrutinising each and every aspect of our accounts. They were able to conclude after that scrutinisation that we did present the accounts in a true and fair view. They did represent a fair reflection of the Trust's financial affairs as at the 31st of March, and the income and expenditure account was a fair reflection of our financial performance. They confirmed that those accounts had been properly prepared in accordance with the accounting standards and the requirements of Monitor and the NHS Act. They were particularly complimentary to us in terms of our documentation that we prepared, the working papers that we prepared, and the briefings that we had undertaken for both the Trust Board's Audit Committee and the Council of Governors, Governors Audit and Governance Committee. And I'm sure John's here as chair of the Governors Audit and Governance Committee, and he'll be able to corroborate that that was the case. Importantly as well, I think Deloitte's were able to, they're obliged to report on overall value for money, and they were able to conclude that the Trust had made proper arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resource. And that's a very important point. We are, after all, spending taxpayers' money, and we need to make sure that we're spending that money on behalf of the taxpayer to best effect for the care of our patients and the people who use our services. So that's an important consideration alongside the actual financial results themselves, to give you assurance and the wider population assurance that we're effective stewards of the money that we use. To the financial results then, the Chairman's covered some of this, but we achieved an overall surplus for the Trust of 5.5 million. So that was in excess of the plan of 2 million that we'd submitted to Monitor for the year. What that does, that enables us to invest that excess of surplus, that surplus in service developments, in capital investments to support the development of our clinical strategy, so we can put that to use for our services, for the local population, in order to further develop services in the way that we need to continue that service improvement. Chairman's already covered the fact that we spent 15 million on capital investment in 13-14. Predominantly, a lot of that is simply to maintain the existing stock of assets, to replace the medical equipment when it needs replacing, to update the IT systems when those need replacing, to maintain the buildings that we operate from. But we were able to invest in state-of-the-art vascular surgery suite at Durham and to invest in the digitisation of our clinical records and to move us into the 21st century and away from paper notes. Our cash balance at the end of March 2014 was 68 million, and that produces a solid platform on which to allow us to consider capital investment into the future and to support that evolving clinical strategy. And that's a key consideration for us going forward. The board are obliged to review the Trust's financial position and confirm that it is a going concern. It does this by not only reviewing its past results, but by also taking a detailed look at the plans that we are obliged to submit to monitor. And in the light of that consideration, the board were able to conclude that we continue to be a going concern. But they do recognise the risk, and we recognise the risk in and around the fact that, as I've said earlier, we have to make a 4% efficiency requirement each and every year, and that is a very challenging target to meet in the current environment. To get a little bit technical, but I have to, in respect of making sure I'm providing a comprehensive report to you, Monitor changed their regulation regime through the year, and on the 1st of October introduced their risk assessment framework. On the back of that, they introduced the continuity of service risk rating, which is the financial risk rating, if you like, upon which they determine the financial risk that individual foundation trusts are looking at in terms of their financial results. We achieved our plan at a risk rating of 3. The rating itself is on a scale of 1 to 4. So 1 represents significant risk and 4 represents no evident concerns. We achieved our plan. The 2 components of that metric are the capital service cover. So that's the ability of us to meet our ongoing debts in respect of financing, and our liquidity, which is in and around effectively the cash that we have. So we have a very good score on liquidity because of our cash balance. We're not so good on capital service cover, but that's a historic position because of the PFI hospitals, the private finance hospitals that we operate out of in Durham, Darlington and Chestley Street. Again, just to be comprehensive in terms of how we performed against our targets. When we started the year under a different regime. So this was the compliance framework, of which there were 5 metrics, and I've listed them there. Other than the first one, which is EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortisation, where we were slightly behind our target, we overachieved on all of the others, and that's consistent effectively with the overachievement of the overall surplus. So that concludes basically the summary of our financial performance and the accounts in 13-14. The Chairman's invited me to say a little bit about the current year and the financial outlook. We submitted our 2-year operational plan to Monitor in April and our 5-year strategic plan to Monitor in June. Monitor have reviewed that operational plan. They haven't felt it necessary to call it in for a second stage review, so that's good news. So they are content with the plan as it stands, but they recognise, as we do, that there are risks in and around that we need to manage. The plans themselves are predicated on the evolving clinical strategy and the 3 key areas of improvement that we're looking to make that the Chairman went through in his opening remarks. Again, the Chairman talked about our bold and ambitious capital investment programme of 98 million, which is predicated upon our ability to meet our surpluses going forward. And whilst we only plan for modest surpluses, nonetheless, they are continuing to be challenging in the financial environment that we are in. That 98 million, again, will largely be lots of replacement of existing assets, and that's about maintaining our current operating capacity so that we can continue to provide services to patients in an efficient way. But it is around where we are able to improve services further and allow service transformation to improve the outcomes to patients and the patient experience. So things in there are in and around a major upgrade of theatres at Darlington, the investment in the emergency department facilities at both Durham and Darlington, patient flow systems across the trust to make that patient flow more efficient in terms of the way that we handle that, electronic prescribing systems across the trust to improve safety and effectiveness in terms of how we prescribe and the impact of that. Facilitating mobile working in the community so we can get more face-to-face time between our clinicians in the community and patients and less time spent on administration, and in terms of improving the education facilities at Durham. So those are all part of our plans, but they are predicated on achieving our financial results going forward. And in terms of those challenging financial results going forward, you might have read, even this week, an article in The Guardian, which is reflecting upon results in the current year to date, where over half of hospital trusts are now declaring a deficit in the current year. And The Guardian is suggesting that we're heading for an NHS is heading for an overall deficit of 1 billion. Our financial position is equally tight. We have declared to monitor at Q1 in 2014 that we are in deficit. We're in deficit to 2.5 million, which is actually 1.7 million behind plan. And there are factors that are driving that, not least of which is the difficulty with making services, continuing to make services more efficient. The board is fully aware of the position. It's held an extraordinary meeting in August in order to go through the position in some depth. We've agreed a series of actions to get that under control and return us to where we need to be. And we will continue to be relentless in the pursuit of ensuring that our financial position is secure, but we will never, ever compromise patient safety or patient services in doing so. So that was my brief outline. As I said, there's lots more detail in the packs that you have there, and I'll be happy to take any questions later, either in the formal forum or informally. Thank you.